Okay, everyone, I want to welcome to the show someone who has given us some of their time tonight, and he is the lead announcer for Ring of Honor Wrestling, which you know I write the columns for the hits and misses on the PW Torch site. And I want to welcome to the show Ian Riccaboni. Ian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. And I hope you got the check. I saw the nice things you've written. So uh, those clear every Monday. I make sure there's
Uh,
money.
oh boy. I promise everyone, Ian does not have to pay me. He does a great job without without paying me. It is funny though that you say that because I am very conscious a lot of times when I am writing the articles and praising, and sometimes it's a hit and misses column, so sometimes you have to say things are amiss in your mind, and I'm always trying to be I try to be mindful that it's not like a personal thing. It's just something that I'm like, that didn't, I didn't get that, or it didn't work for me. But I understand it could work for others. So, when it comes to you, there are no misses, man. I really enjoy your commentary. It has been excellent since you've taken over as the lead announcer.
I appreciate that. I've been in really good hands. We have a great production staff that not a lot of people talk about that have really gotten me prepared. And of course, Kevin Kelly has been a friend and a mentor. And um, I've been with Ring of Honor. A lot of folks don't know this, but I've been with Ring of Honor 3 years. And it's something that I've really put a lot of time and effort into, but I wouldn't have done that hadn't it been reciprocated, with folks like Kevin Kelly, Steve Carino, and the list goes on and on. Guys know what he talks about, like Chris Resnick, who's an editor, Mark Brown. So just a lot of help, a lot of hands-on help. Even guys like Brutal Bob Evans, Jeff Jones, guys that have really been there, done that kind of thing. They've all had a shape in molding me. And so it's just really exciting to have this kind of opportunity at this kind of level.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was going to ask this. You're talking about all the guys that have been helpful to you and whatnot. I was going to ask actually as we got later on to the discussion, but since you mentioned it, I looked back at that ESPN column that you retweeted on Twitter, and I found it really insightful how you actually first started the process of becoming a wrestling commentator slash announcer there. Can you talk about that process from, going to the Monster Factory? Because like you said, it's been a few years where you interviewed Blue Meanie, I think it was, and correct me if I misstate anything, and then you caught the eye of Kevin Kelly, along with everything in between, and then you paid some dues, breaking down the ring, putting up the ring. I had no clue. I knew you had been with Ring of Honor for a while, but the story and the backstory, even before all of that, was an interesting one that I bet a lot of people didn't realize.
Yeah, for a lot of folks, it may seem like I just kind of popped up out of nowhere, but in reality, I had always been a pro wrestling fan. Growing up, I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's where a lot of the All Star Wrestling tapings were, and Ag Hall at the Allentown Fairgrounds. And so there's always been something kind of in the water in Allentown. It's never listed as one of the great wrestling cities, but you look at the history there. I think there was 8 tag team title changes there for the WWF, and they ran pretty much monthly, if not biweekly there. And so everybody from Bruno Sammartino to superstar Billy Graham, later to Bob Backlund and Hulk Hogan, kind of came through Allentown, and then later Allentown and Bethlehem, part of the Lehigh Valley, became, good towns for the WWF. Allentown became a decent town for ECW, and we actually had a lot of independents. We had the NWF swing through. We also had the EWF swing through in the late 90s. That was pretty consistent. Of course, the Wild Samoans, the WXW. So growing up, I was always surrounded by this, and I was always interested in becoming a wrestling announcer. And there was just something magnetic about guys like Tony Schiavone, really guys like Vince McMahon too. Those were probably my 2 favorites growing up. Guys that really just, they looked professional, they sounded professional, and they had the best seat in the house. They were in front and center for professional wrestling. So as a kid, I thought, man, nothing could be better. But it was all I did things throughout my life that set groundwork, and I don't know if they were on purpose. I don't know if they were things I consciously thought about, but I always kind of kept the dream in the back of my head that maybe if the time is right, I'll give this wrestling announcing thing a try. So, I went to college. I went to NYU for broadcasting, for media and communications. I did whatever I could. I've kind of told a little bit of the story before, but there weren't a whole lot of opportunities to get kind of on air reps and on camera reps in the media and communications program. So what I did was I spent a summer down with my brother in Orlando. I was a newsreader for the NPR affiliate down there. And then I got myself cast on some MTV specials just to get in front of a camera. And, I was on a special with Bill Gates and did some other things with MTVU. So those were things that, I was pursuing. But the whole time I thought, well, maybe I'll just have a career in advertising, or maybe I'll just have a career, pushing papers, or maybe I'll just be, I'll get this degree and then I'll just go work somewhere and I'll be fine with it. But something in the back of my head kept saying, build this foundation. If you continue to build the foundation, you have plenty of time. Over time, the foundation will become a house. It'll be something that you can kind of present as your credentials. So as I continued down that path, I went to grad school. And in grad school, one of my best friends from high school, Chris Freed, started a public access show. And on that public access show, I played a sidekick. I was the leader of the house band. I played bass guitar and sang. And, again, that was in Allentown. And we actually had a slight wrestling connection there. We had Samu of the Wild Samoans come on. And we actually had a match between our host, Chris, and former WWE developmental talent, Matt Walsh, who was one of Samu's stars at the time. So we had that happen. And, of course, the funny kicker to that is Adam Cole was among the group that came to help set up and break down the ring that night.
Wow.
So, yeah. So talk about coming full circle, talk about small world. There's a connection there. But, even though it was just minor, it was public access, I'd ask the cameraman, hey, why are you setting up over there? Hey, why are we shooting this like this? What do we plan to do with this? How are we going to transition? So I'd ask about the production elements. And I just wanted to get as much hands-on experience as I could in front of the camera or behind the camera. From there, I started writing. I'm a huge Phillies fan, lifelong Phillies fan. And they were really, really good. So a lot of interest. I started writing a personal blog. Then I got invited to write for PhilliesNation.com. We won the USA Today Baseball Blog of the Year 2 years in a row when I was there. So I'm very proud of that. And but then we did vlogs for Phillies Nation, just small videos. And they had pretty decent production value. And so I asked Pat Gallen, who became an Emmy-winning sports anchor, I said, hey, we're doing these videos. I have some contacts at Service Electric. We can at least air them in public access time. Maybe they'll let us have a spot before the Iron Pigs air, the AAA affiliate of the Phillies. And so that actually ended up working out. A year later, Comcast Sportsnet picks up the show, and we're on Comcast Sportsnet for 3 years. So all of a sudden, I'm getting all this interview experience. I'm getting on-camera experience. I'm getting television writing experience. And it's for something that I really like and I'm passionate about. But this whole time, I'm still watching wrestling. I'm not quite up to, Brian Last's level of tape trading where, I don't have rare cuts of Memphis, or I don't have masters.
Let me tell you, Brian's a friend of mine, and I'm actually co-hosting the 605 this week with him for the second time. But I don't know many people who are on Brian Last's level. It would take that guy's got a PhD in every territory. Let me just say that. So yes, I know exactly where you're coming from when you say that about Brian.
Absolutely. Well, I just listened to the latest episode. It was great. It kept me very entertained on a plane ride back to Providence, Rhode Island. But,
awesome.
yeah. But I thought I was super hip. I was a tape trader, but I only traded for some of the more common stuff. Stuff that is readily available, WWF, WCW, ECW, that kind of stuff. So now, because of Brian Last and because of the internet, I'm being exposed to a lot more. we're revisiting a lot more that I may have briefly seen in my childhood. But that whole time though, whether it was middle school, right when the Attitude Era started happening, I'd order tapes or trade tapes. High school, I started to have some disposable income, so I went back and I have a massive Coliseum video collection. In college, it became pretty easy to trade DVDs, so that happened. And then, from there on out, all of a sudden, I have this huge collection of wrestling, and this whole time, I'm still a big fan. So fast forward to 2013, one of the ways that Phillies Nation thought they could utilize me best was to send me sort of on assignment and interview famous Phillies fans. So first guy I interview is Mark Summers from Double Dare, and he's awesome, and he's just a great guy. And
All right, that was a show of my childhood, so I remember that. Yes.
yeah, and he's got amazing Philadelphia credentials. He's from Indianapolis, but Double Dare started filming when it began filming. It started in Philadelphia. He moved his whole family here, and they've stayed ever since. So he's been in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area, longer than I have. So
Wow, I never knew that.
yeah, he's got legitimate Philadelphia credentials. So that was really cool. And then from there, I talked to Tony Luke. Later on, I talked to, and these aren't Philadelphia residents, but we just happened to have some interview time because publicity things worked out. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jesse the Body Ventura. But the one that really kind of hooked me was the Blue Meanie. Brian is a great, great guy, and he's got fascinating stories. And he's just a guy that you talk about student of the game. He's like a walking encyclopedia, and he's somebody that I met, and he said, "Well, why don't we go down to the Monster Factory? It'd be a great setting. You can interview me in the ring. We can do the stupid thing where the wrestler beats up the reporter. Everybody's a good time, and then get the Monster Factory publicity too, because Danny Cage is taking over for Larry Sharp, and he's a great guy, and Larry's going to be there, so we can get publicity for the whole thing." And I said, "Sure, that sounds great." So we went there, and it was a really fun interview. We talked a lot about his memories of going to the Veterans Stadium, the original stadium,
The
not the
vet.
original,
Yep.
but yeah, but one of the stadiums here in Philly. And we were having a great time, and Danny Cage walked over, and we got some stuff in with Danny, and we're talking, and I remember talking to Danny. I said, "Hey, if my friend wanted to do this, how would my friend get involved as a wrestling announcer?" And he said, "Well, your friend should show up next Saturday. There's an event. He should learn to break down the ring, set up the ring, learn what it takes to put on a show. He should get here bright and early. This, that, and the other thing." And he gave me, essentially how to break in as a wrestler was pretty much the same as how to break in as a wrestling announcer. And it gave me a really nice perspective kind of out of the gate as to what the wrestlers do, because I had to do it too. And he soon caught on that it wasn't my friend, that it was me that wanted to do it, and that very quickly, it was something that might work out. But he had me coming around for a good 3-4 months before he let me do anything, and whether that was just YouTube stuff or things for the website or whatnot. There was a certain kind of growing period where I think he just wanted to make sure that I really was interested in doing it before he invested his own time in me. But that's how I got the ball rolling, and it's kind of crazy because the whole time, I think folks are often a lot closer to realizing their dreams than they think, or realizing their goal than they think, because a lot of times it's just when opportunity meets execution. And it's a lot of times just following through, because almost in every situation, somebody has done what you're dreaming of doing before, and there's a blueprint, and there's a way to get there. And it's not always going to be the same way, but because somebody has done it, that means it's possible. And so, I started taking advice from Danny. I started taking advice from Blue Meanie, from Bill Wiles of ECW, who's a trainer at the Monster Factory. And then, Danny really started to branch out. We started to get some guest trainers like Cliff Compton, Brutal Bob Evans. I went to a Brutal Bob Evans seminar where, I took some bumps and, I learned some wrestling things. And he pulls me aside and he goes, "You're an announcer, right?" I said, "Yeah." So and he had me, do a couple things, and he goes, "I want to have you meet Kevin." I said, "Okay, great." Yeah, and I didn't realize he meant Kevin Kelly,
Right.
and so I'm just thinking, okay, Kevin, you're a nice guy. I'm sure this Kevin guy's nice too. So, we go on. He goes, "You're going to be around May 31st, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be here at the Monster Factory." And then about 2 weeks later, I see Danny Cage post a Kevin Kelly seminar poster on Facebook advertising for May 31st. So I come in the best suit I have, and it was a hodgepodge of things I bought from the thrift store that happened to fit really nicely. And because I didn't have any money then, this was only 4 years ago. So, or 3 years ago. So I cobbled together the best outfit I could, and made, got a haircut, did all that fun stuff, showed up in my suit and sat there patiently as Kevin, walked through the deal. And he's having everybody essentially give local town promos,
Hmm.
advertising their match or a match they'd like to have for that night. And we get through all the wrestlers, and finally he says, "Guy in the suit, stand up and sell me some tickets." So I stand up, and my heart, my heart's pounding, and I get up, and he says, "All right, you got 60 seconds. Run through tonight's cards, sell it to me the best you can. Go." And we're doing that, and he's giving me time cues like a producer would, like we'd have in Phillies Nation, and I'm feeling it. I'm just in a zone, and he's counting me down. I'm seeing the 5, 4, the 3, 2, 1. At right at 1, I wrapped it up, and he had some, he said, "Great job." He had some advice, some critiques, and then he said, "You smile all the time. Let me hear you deliver some bad news." So what I did was there's a wrestler called the Red Scorpion who was at the camp, and I had breaking backstage news that the Red Scorpion had just broken his exoskeleton and would be out for 6 to 8 months. And so I delivered that in the most serious way possible. And and then throughout the day, I just kind of followed Kevin around, and that was the first time I met Kevin. And then afterwards, Bob said, "I told you should meet Kevin. Aren't you glad you did?" And that's when it all came together for me. But
Man.
yeah, yeah. And Kevin started asking me he said, "Hey, I can't guarantee anything. There's no promises, but I know we're working on some web initiatives. I know we're thinking about this thing called Future of Honor. I know we're thinking about starting up Women of Honor. We'd like to have a kind of separate, kind of newer voice for those. So would you like to come around? If you start coming to the events, the folks will get to know you." And same kind of thing, for my first 6 months, setup, breakdown, the whole 9 yards. And
Hmm.
I got my first opportunity on July 22nd, I believe it was, Future of Honor number 2. And then from there, it was about a 6 month dry spell, maybe 5 month dry spell, until I got to call my first actual Ring of Honor match. And that was Cheeseburger versus Chris LaRusso. So that was really fun match. Drove myself down to Nashville. No promises, no guarantees. But I showed up, and there was an opportunity for me, and I just kept doing it. Success kind of got, well, not even success, but just opportunity got addicting. So I just I knew that I couldn't call matches that I wasn't there to call, if that makes sense. So
It
I
makes perfect sense in the wrestling business. Yes. Yeah.
so I I would press a suit, which by this time had upgraded to the $22 thrift store suit, and, and make sure I had my toothbrush, my hair gel, and I got myself to places like Las Vegas, San Antonio, on my own dime, in addition to places like Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York. And I really wanted to put myself in a position where I would keep getting opportunities, and thankfully, it paid off, and I had a lot of good people help me improve over that time.
That's a great story. I mean, it just shows you that you stick with it, persevere. Good things generally do happen, and it kind of leads me into what I wanted to ask you about. So, tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought that I remember the first time as you technically, I guess, the lead announcer. At least from what I remember on TV this year was the Top Prospect Tournament when that kicked off. Is that about right, or was it before that? I was trying to
It is.
remember.
Yeah. So the very first time I was kind of handed the keys to the car, was in Pittsburgh, and that was
Yes.
when we
Okay.
filmed 4 episodes of television. It was the top prospect tournament, so I was kind of getting thrown into the deep end right away because not only, I had called full shows. I think I'd called 11 full shows in 2016, not television episodes, but some of our VOD and DVDs. So
Right.
I'd gotten to know some of the wrestlers and their moves and things like that. But it's a different animal when all of a sudden you have 8 brand new faces that maybe you've seen before in the, I'd seen before in independent wrestling, or maybe I'd seen them before in the Ring of Honor tryout camps. But it's something different to actually call their moves and to know their idiosyncrasies and really know them from a holistic level. So on that night, I had 11 different combinations of 9 different partners. So it was really something where it
Yeah.
was a challenging night. I had the 9 partners and 11 combinations, calling the top prospect tournament first round with 8 folks that I'd never called matches for before outside of Chris LaRusso. And then it was also we filmed the what they call the go home to the pay per view. We filmed the final episode before 15th anniversary. So it was a bit of a learning curve. I jumped right in, but yeah, that's a night I won't forget anytime soon.
I remember that. I think the reason it sticks in my mind is because I remember writing the column that week, and it was your first time, and that's why it stuck in my mind. And I remember saying to myself, it wasn't just the matches and the combinations of who you had to call matches on. What I thought was good was you were able to, in commentary, do it with Colt, Brutal Bob, Silas, Young. I mean, there was, and I'm missing a few names here. You called all these matches over, like, not just that week, but in the next couple of weeks with different people. But the one thing I said to myself was, that guy's not missing a beat no matter who he's next to. And I can only imagine that must have been difficult too, because when you're with someone and you co-host something with someone, you build a rapport with them, and you can almost finish their sentences and they can finish yours, so to say. So I can only imagine, was it hard, or how hard was it with so many different partners in the booth with you, like early on?
Yeah. So you mentioned, I'll start at the end first. With Colt, I can almost finish his sentences now, and I think vice versa. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're both wired very similarly.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, we have the same sense of humor, and luckily, we have the same knowledge of 80s and 90s hip hop. So it's something that,
That
you know,
helps.
yeah, absolutely. So it's
Yes.
something that we really enjoy doing, and I think we formed a cool partnership. And it's something where he's very, very, very good, and he's been great to work with and bounce ideas off of, having been a wrestler. So there's a lot of things that not only is Colt being an amazing podcaster an advantage because he's great at having conversations, but he's also great if we're thinking of things to say about matches, and I can bounce something off of him, and he can tell me, you know what, as a wrestler, I wouldn't want somebody saying that, or as, no, you know what, as a wrestler, that sounds pretty good. I'd use that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so he gives that perspective on how to best accentuate the talent that we have, and how to really how to really feature their strengths, and to highlight some of the better aspects of who each person is. But going back to that, it's interesting you mentioned Silas Young. I had called matches with Silas Young in Texas the week before the TV taping, in addition to some on that Pittsburgh taping. And Silas was a guy who's very, very good. He just needed to do it once or twice. And by the time he did it and he got comfortable, and we kind of had that, he kind of had a feeling for my timing, and I kind of had a feeling for his, he was awesome. Same thing with Brutal Bob. Brutal Bob's a guy that he's been around, he's been there, done that, gotten a t shirt, and is proud of it. And he's a guy that also is a very, very good talker. Luckily, Bob and I have known each other for forever. We've texted, we talk, so he and I were, he and I have a good rapport that dates back beyond what you may see on television. But maybe for somebody like Alex Shelley. Alex Shelley is a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge. Like Colt, he's been around. He's one of the great pillars of Ring of Honor's rich history. And for he and I to really work well together, I think there was a kind of a just getting a comfortability of just his cadence and his style, and sort of his references and what I could serve up to him and what he could volley back and what he could serve up to me and what I could volley back. Because he's got such a unique perspective as somebody that has really been around the world. And also, his relationship with Jay White, he's a fantastic mentor. That's not something that's embellished or said on TV to say it. Jay White really does live with Alex Shelley, and Alex Shelley really does train with Jay White and work out with Jay White. And so just that he's got an amazing perspective. So with guys like Alex Shelley or maybe guys like Bobby Fish, some of the veteran wrestlers that are great talkers, it's just a matter of finding their cadence, finding their rhythm, finding their points of reference, and really highlighting those in addition to what's going on with them inside of the context of Ring of Honor.